Welcome to the Session 1 panel presentation and discussion, How Care and Research Have Changed During COVID-19. My name is Kristen Wheeden, and I serve as the Executive Director of the American Porphyria Foundation and as co-chair of the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network Coalition of Patient Advocacy Groups, a group of nearly 200 rare disease patient advocacy groups supported by M.P.H programs. Like you, COVID-19 has required us in the porphyria community to pivot to continue our important research and our access to care. I am beyond proud of our porphyria patients and members and grateful to our dedicated researchers. The challenges that face the rare disease community in the face of this global pandemic are unique, especially related to our ability to carry out important research and to receive treatment and care. It seems that the world has received an education on disease from research to treatment, through advancing therapeutics, through the eyes of this pandemic, and now has a taste of what those with rare disease often live with every day. That can include frustration, fear and uncertainty, isolation and anxiety, emotional exhaustion, as well as pain. And perhaps most important of all, hope. Hope that researchers and policymakers will focus on us every single day, and they will rise to the challenge, as Dr. Collins shared earlier today. Now, the presenters in this upcoming session have cared about rare throughout the pandemic and will share their perspectives on how healthcare and research has shifted over the past year in response to the pandemic. This session is beautifully laid out to include perspectives from a brave rare disease patient, a brilliant physician, a leader in patient advocacy, and a policy expert. So my motto is always patient first. So we will start this session with our rare disease patient, Lisa Kosak. And remember, after the presentation, we will gather again for Q&A. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is Lisa Kosak, and I'm honored to be here with you today for this great event to spread awareness for rare diseases and disorders, such as alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Like many rare diseases and disorders, alpha-1 is a genetic inherited condition. Alpha-1 may result in serious lung disease in adults and or liver disease at any age. In my case, it was my lungs. I was born with 2 deficient genes, but only diagnosed with the condition at the age of 43. I currently live in Vero Beach, Florida. I was born and raised in Northeast Minneapolis and moved to Colorado in 1996. In 2007, I was diagnosed at National Jewish Hospital in Denver. It took over a year to diagnose me with alpha-1, which is not normal for a rare condition. That was quick. It usually takes close to 7 years to get an accurate diagnosis. Our home in Colorado was located at an elevation above 7,000 feet, which in turn was really hurting my lungs. In 2008, packed up all our belongings and moved to sea level in Florida. My breathing has improved dramatically with the decrease in elevation. Living with a rare disorder is not easy. Like many rare disorders, alpha-1 is one that cannot be seen, an invisible handicap. When necessary, I must wear oxygen, but I too get the stares when you park in a handicapped spot to be closer to the store. Living with a rare disease during the COVID-19 pandemic has been extremely difficult. In March 2020, I thought that this was only going to last a maximum of 1 month. It'll be okay, and everything will get back to normal. Oh boy, was I wrong. A close alpha friend that was a 14-year lung transplant recipient contracted COVID-19, was hospitalized, and unfortunately passed away very quickly. COVID became very real to me. This was killing people like me. It brought home just how severe it was. And I had to take this seriously. I was hoping and praying that the shutdown was going to fix this. Living with alpha-1 for over 14 years, I had the tools to be prepared. Always been very careful during the winter months because of cold and flu season. I was always aware of my alpha issues and took care of them immediately. But this was different. I was not the only one affected. The whole world was dealing with this. And us alphas, we're on high alert. I turned to my community for help and learned what I needed to do. The Alpha One Foundation had a designated COVID-19 webpage with guidance and recommendations specific to alphas. There were resources available from letters to employers to information on how to access home infusion benefits, timely topic webinars, and social media posts were also extremely helpful. As with many rare diseases, disease patients can relate. The organizations have your best interest in mind and gather specialists in their field to provide you with the best and most current advice. In my case, the Alpha One Foundation had compiled a COVID-19 medical leadership team, including 2 physicians that are involved in this event, Dr. Janine Darmiento and fellow panelist and the doctor who diagnosed me, Dr. Sandy Sandhaus, Robert Sandy Sandhaus. They linked us to the CDC and NIH for facts and provided us great information on face masks and how to stay safe and healthy. We learned not just to quarantine, but how to cocoon during this year. When this all began, we did not know what we do now. Everything stopped. Research and clinical trials were put on hold. People could not travel to participate in trials. They were afraid of getting sick. It truly brought out the severity of COVID-19. Everything went on hold. I got angry when people were not compliant. They were putting all of our lives at risk. Important research that needed to take place in the rare disease space came to a halt. I am a part of the Alpha One Research Registry and have always known the importance of science and the patient's participation in finding a cure. The COVID-19 vaccine development brought so much awareness to how powerful science is and how taking part in it leads to solutions that lead to cures. It also showcased the stages of clinical trials and brought light to the importance of participation to find cures for so many other diseases. Many people with Alpha One lung disease, such as myself, receive augmentation therapy, which is derived from plasma. I receive weekly infusions from a nurse that I've had since 2008. Out of an abundance of precaution, I schedule her first thing in the morning so that I'm her first patient. It's terrifying to have anyone in the house. But knowing that this weekly therapy keeps me healthy, I have to take this risk. Many alphas had to navigate to get access for coverage for home infusions to avoid going into hospitals and/or infusion centers to prevent contracting the COVID-19. Worrying about missing a week of augmentation therapy is stressful, as this therapy helps prevent the progression of this chronic disorder. Keeping stress levels down by keeping routines and being active in the home has helped me and others tremendously. But have a positive mindset. Alphas rely on plasma donations for augmentation therapy, keep our lungs healthy, and prevent further disease progression. During this health crisis, the public became very aware how powerful plasma-derived therapies are and how critical plasma donors are. Thank you to each of them. I became even more empowered this year to use my voice, to have the patient voice heard. Like today's event, I've participated in plasma awareness campaigns and the Alpha One Virtual Lobby Day in November to advocate for what we need during this time. I've also reached out to local and national government officials to obtain proclamations for Alpha One antitrypsin awareness. I have seen Alpha friends have to leave jobs as first responders, teachers, and nurses, just to name a few, due to the fear of getting sick. I've had to change doctors during the pandemic, as many changes have occurred in the healthcare, and many doctors have retired or closed their practices. 1 year ago, I immediately went into lockdown mode. I cannot wait for normal again. Not having been in a grocery store or restaurant since March, I cannot wait to be able to pick up my own fruits and vegetables and not have the Instacart person pick them for me. And my kids. I long to be able to see them, hug them, spend time with them, and not be afraid. In the past year, I've only seen my children twice, but not without precautions, including them going into a 2-week quarantine before our visit. Last year was hard. My son RJ came home from serving 2 years in Japan in the Navy, and I could not greet him upon his arrival. And my son Paul's destination wedding was postponed, and they got married in November in their backyard. I watched on Zoom. I went wedding dress shopping for RJ's fiance via Zoom, and their wedding scheduled for the end of May will probably have to be pushed out again. In years past, living in Florida brought visitors from up north, my brothers, their wives, my nieces, cousins, and friends. But not now, and not for the last year. I'm hoping that representing the patient will bring awareness for what we deal with each and every day, especially during this time. The decisions made here impact my life and the entire rare disease community. Thank you again to the National Institute of Health for this incredible opportunity to have my rare disease voice heard.
Hello, I'm Robert Sandhaus, a physician at National Jewish Health in Denver and the medical director of the Alpha One Foundation and AlphaNet. I'm going to talk about the physician's perspective on rare diseases and the effect COVID-19 has had on clinical research in rare diseases. As an introduction to clinical trials in rare diseases, I'm going to talk about clinical trials in general. Clinical trials involve enrolling individuals with a particular condition or healthy volunteers to evaluate the safety and the effectiveness of a novel therapy. They start with early safety studies called phase 1 trials involving a small number of individuals, move on to phase 2 trials, which look at dose response effects and additional safety information, and finally much larger phase 3 trials that are designed to show the effectiveness of a given therapy and hopefully leading to a submission to a regulatory authority like the Food and Drug Administration. Clinical trials involve studies of novel treatments or evaluations of clinical evidence through the voluntary participation of willing, educated participants. The larger the number of participants in a given trial, the faster it can be completed and the more confidence can be placed in the results. This presents a major challenge for studies in rare diseases, even in the absence of a worldwide pandemic. That leads to our discussion of the effect of COVID-19 on clinical trials in rare diseases. Clinical trials in rare diseases require coordination of the sites with expertise in those diseases being studied and an interest of those sites in performing such trials. Participation of individuals with rare disease often requires traveling to the study site and study procedures that have to be done in a hospital or clinic setting where individuals with a variety of other diseases are followed. The COVID-19 pandemic has made both travel and visiting those clinical settings challenging or impossible for many individuals with rare disease. In addition, many with rare diseases are at greater risk of severe disease should they contract COVID-19, so they can be much more hesitant to travel to clinical sites or to go to clinical settings where other diseased individuals are present. The result of this is that the last thing a clinical trial site wants to do is to put someone at risk of developing COVID-19 due to trial participation. This has resulted in clinical trials in rare disease being shut down, being postponed in their start, having limited enrollment due to travel restrictions, including only enrolling patients who are local to the site being there where the study is being performed, and being affected by individuals who develop COVID-19 during the course of clinical trial participation. Some studies have been able to have study visits done by telemedicine instead of coming to a clinical site, or by having home nursing visits perform some of the study procedures. As more individuals are vaccinated and the COVID-19 pandemic becomes controlled, clinical trials in rare diseases should be able to reopen, expand enrollment, and eventually be completed. Now I'm going to talk about how COVID has affected one particular rare disease. In order to do that, I have to explain to you what AlphaNet is. AlphaNet is a not-for-profit organization founded in 1995 by 3 patients with the rare genetic condition alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, which leads to lung disease in adults and liver disease in children and adults with this condition. AlphaNet provides free disease management services to individuals with this condition. Subscribers to AlphaNet are called each month by their AlphaNet coordinator, or ANC as we call them, to provide education and to collect healthcare utilization data and quality of life. All AlphaNet coordinators are individuals with alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. At present, AlphaNet employs 67 full-time AlphaNet coordinators to call just over 7,000 subscribers with alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. We refer to this as alphas serving alphas. Beginning in 2020, in the first week of April, AlphaNet added questions about COVID-19 and its treatment to our monthly questionnaires. And I'm going to show you some of the results that we obtained by asking these monthly questionnaires. From April to December of 2020, about just over 6,900 individuals, actually just over 7,000 individuals, actually answered our COVID questionnaires. The first question was, has anyone in your household been diagnosed with COVID-19? And as you can see from the diagram on the left, about 8%, or just over 600 of the individuals said there was a diagnosis of COVID-19 in their household. And of those, 5% said that they themselves were the individual in their household with COVID-19. This means that in general, people with alpha-1 had done a good job of protecting themselves from getting COVID. This is a lower percentage than the general population of infected individuals during that time. So by following recommendations of mask wearing, social distancing, avoiding crowds, avoiding indoor spaces, our alpha-1 patients had been able to protect themselves to a large extent from getting COVID-19. Then we asked those who had been diagnosed with COVID-19 how they had been managed. 67% said that they had been treated at home. 33% said that they'd been hospitalized. 8% of those were in the ICU, and 25% of the total population were just in the hospital without having to go to the ICU. Overall, this represents a larger percentage of the population who required hospitalization or ICU stay than the general population. So it suggested to us that while alphas protect themselves better from getting COVID, if they do get COVID-19, they're more likely to require hospitalization and potentially an ICU stay than the general population of individuals who develop COVID-19. Moving on to the development of immunity, we're all concerned about whether first a COVID infection might then protect you from getting infected again, or whether a vaccine might protect you from ever getting infected. So if we look at someone who develops a primary infection with the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, once someone gets infected, there's a dramatic increase in the number of viral particles and viral load in an individual, but it's accompanied within a week by the development of early stages of an immune response that then develops later on into a IgG and memory response that in most individuals kills off that virus and protects them from getting the most severe forms of the disease. Then over the course of several weeks, after someone's viral load has decreased to zero, that immune response peters away. And months later, if that person is exposed to COVID infection again, the expectation is that that immune response will rapidly appear again and protect that individual from getting infected again. And what we know is that in people who develop an immune response, that they are clearly protected from another infection for many months. There are cases of people who have developed secondary infection after a primary infection has occurred, but fortunately at present, that number is small. Now let's look at the same type of graph designed to look at vaccination and its effects. If you get vaccinated at that time zero, it takes about a week for the immune response to those antigens and viral-like proteins that are administered during a vaccination to develop the exact same immune response that someone would have if they'd gotten an infection. And in some ways, an even more robust response. In many cases, the vaccines have developed much higher titers of antibody than the actual original infection would have. Months later, after someone's developed this immunity, if they were exposed to the SARS-CoV virus, they have the same memory of a response to those antigens and can fight off the virus in a perfect world where all vaccines work and work well. The good news is that the current crop of vaccines does work very well. We obviously are all concerned about mutations in the virus that might make them break free from that immune response. So far, we have no evidence that there is that breakout from vaccine protection that many of us are concerned about. So let's talk about vaccines. Again, beginning in April, AlphaNet started asking our Alpha-1 patients, if a vaccine to prevent COVID-19 were available, would you get it? And over the year that we have been asking those questions, we found that 43% of individuals who responded said they would definitely get it. 32% said they would probably get it. 14% they said they would probably not get it. And 11% said that they would definitely not get it. Now, certainly the people who said they would probably not get it can be affected by gathering information about vaccines and seeing that vaccines are effective over time. And even those who said definitely not may find as vaccines are more widely available and we see a decline in COVID infections, hospitalizations, and death, may be convincible to relinquish their vaccine hesitancy and eventually get vaccinated, which is what we need to have population immunity to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. In summary, SARS-CoV-2 causes the disease COVID-19. Individuals with rare disease with proper education and adherence to recommendations can help themselves to avoid COVID-19. Individuals with rare disease, especially those with conditions that affect the lungs or the immune system, are at greater risk of developing severe disease should they get infected with COVID-19. COVID-19 has impaired in-person care and in-person clinical trials of individuals with rare disease. And vaccines are an important tool to prevent severe disease during times of COVID-19. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Hart, the CEO of the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation, and I'm currently serving as the Rare Diseases Clinical Research Network's Coalition of Patient Advocacy Group Steering Committee Chair. I'm also part of the Rare Bone Disease Alliance and the Rare Bone Disease Patient Network. I'm going to talk to you for the next few minutes about how the OI Foundation pivoted our programs and activities to a virtual format in response to the pandemic. We were most concerned about getting our information to the OI community quickly to keep our community informed and safe, most importantly. For those who don't know, OI is a rare genetic bone disorder that causes bones to break easily, but people with OI may also have other issues, including hearing loss, dental issues, and pulmonary issues, which makes COVID-19 such a big concern for our community. And just quickly, much of what I'll talk about in the next few minutes are things that many of you did and are doing if you're a part of a patient advocacy organization. And you know, like we do, that none of what we did could have happened and continue to do without the support of our dedicated medical professionals and volunteers. So here we go. We all remember March 13th, 2020. I told my staff to take what they needed home to work for a few weeks, and we would reevaluate at our next staff meeting. Well, we are still reevaluating, as most of you are. But we knew we had to provide information on COVID, keep our community connected, and still provide the research and education that we needed to. And we especially know keeping our community connected was really important given what we know about COVID and our communities and what Lisa even spoke about earlier about just the isolation. We also knew we had to keep our financial commitments to our grantees. That was really important to our board and to our key stakeholders. So we talked with our stakeholders right away. Our board, our medical advisory council, they jumped right into action. We immediately applied for national, state, and local grants to ensure that our staff had what they needed to work remotely. We weren't set up to work remotely, like many of you probably weren't, but we are now. And then we took an inventory of what was on our agenda for the next 6 months. And what was on our plate? Well, everything was in person. Our national conference was scheduled for July 2020, a scientific meeting the next month. We were expected to raise, over $200,000, closer to $300,000 in revenue from events, in-person events. We had an awareness week, and we had regional conferences starting, coming up and through the rest of 2020. So it was a real concern for us. But our first priority was to communicate with our constituents. And we wanted to tell them, what is COVID-19 and what does it mean to you as a person with OI? And fortunately, we were really familiar with the Zoom platform. We had been doing the Telehealth series for about 1.5 years, so we weren't afraid to use Zoom. And we knew that's what we would use. We also knew that we didn't have the resources to invest in and use a really expensive virtual platform. Our resources are limited, so we use Zoom. So our first community call, we call them that, and we've been calling them that for the last year now almost, was a COVID-19, what does it mean to you, done by Dr. Sandy Sandhaus, who you just heard from. And Dr. Sandhaus has been our hero throughout this whole year, because he immediately held an 1.5-hour session with our community, lots of Q&A, and then we now have that session up on our website. And fast forward, we've done 12, almost 13 community calls since then. We've had over 5,000 views of our community calls. The topics are a variety of topics, and they came from a focus group of constituents that we put together to tell us what you wanted to hear about during this pandemic, what's most important to you. Topics included mental health, depression, anxiety, nutrition, preparing for that telemedicine visit, visiting an emergency room during the pandemic if you have a fracture. That was really, really a concern for folks. And then, of course, vaccine safety, which we are doing several calls right now on vaccine safety, or vaccine information. So we looked at our meetings and we made them virtual. We used Zoom, and for those of you who use Zoom, you know it's not, sometimes it's a little messy, but that's okay. If you know our community, you know that we're a family, and it's okay if somebody loses their connection and we get them back, and we've adapted to that, and it's really served us well. We had our virtual conference in July 2020, and we had over 900 unique email addresses participate. So we know that's probably over 1,000 or 1,200 people. And normally we get about 600 people at our in-person conference. We were able to do patient-centered outcomes research trainings. We have a PCORI award. So we were able to do more than what we had said we would do because we had this opportunity to do things virtually. We held our second OI Bone Health Clinic Town Hall. Again, this virtual platform allowed us to bring in more people than we had ever thought about bringing in before. And then we did something really kind of different. We did a Young Investigator Symposium virtually back in November that attracted over 100 scientists, and we had 13 young investigators present their work. So that was really exciting for us. We've done some fun things with our constituents too. We held a Friendsgiving. We did a New Year's extravaganza, we called it. Our health educator now holds virtual office hours. We're doing virtual support group meetings. So we're trying to make the connection between community members. We're trying to keep people connected and so we're in touch with our community as well through these fun events. And that's been fun. And then fundraising. Like many of you, we had to turn our events virtual. So we held a virtual walk-in wheel, which was fun. That was connected to our national conference. We've had 3 virtual galas so far, which have been terrific. It's a different format. It's not the same. Can't hug people and be in the same room, but we're still together and raising funds for the OI Foundation. And then people are doing peer-to-peer fundraising, which is really fantastic. They've just been very generous. So I think what I wanted to just leave you with is that our takeaway message here for us, for the OI Foundation, is that we can't go back to business as usual. We're going to have this virtual component for our events and our meetings moving forward because people are really expecting it. We know how to do it. And so we're going to make that a priority moving forward. And also just quickly, just wanted to share that we couldn't have done any of what we did without the wonderful volunteers that we have at the OI Foundation, especially our Medical Advisory Council and our board. So we have fabulous volunteers, and they just really stepped up for us and continue to step up. So I'm happy to answer any questions when it's time, and I know my information is in the directory, so we'd be happy to connect with anyone if they wanted to connect after as well. So thanks so much for listening.
Hi, I'm Rachel Sher, Vice President of Policy and Regulatory Affairs here at NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. Our world has been forever changed by the shared experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. By the end of this, we will all know the grief of loss, the impact of serious illness, the fear of the unknown, hopefully the kindness of strangers, the value of friendship and family, and new or changed employment situations and priorities that have been reevaluated. The COVID-19 pandemic is creating tremendous hardship for people with rare diseases. We know this from the calls for help coming into NORD's offices daily and from our community surveys that have helped to uncover the impact of COVID-19 on those living with rare diseases and their loved ones. Early on, NORD took a multi-pronged approach to addressing the challenges faced by the rare disease community with respect to the COVID crisis. We wanted to hear from the community directly and to understand the nature and extent of the issues experienced during this time. Part of that community outreach was through our Rare Action Network. Our ambassadors hosted 128 meetings and events during 2020, which helped give us a better understanding of the challenges that rare disease patients are facing. And you can see from this slide the types of issues and challenges that came up persistently throughout those meetings. Another part of our outreach was conducting 2 COVID-19 community surveys. The first was released in April and the second in June. A total of 1,600 respondents participated in the surveys, and both showed that the community was and continues to be overwhelmingly concerned and impacted by COVID-19. Well over 90% of participants in both surveys indicated that they were worried and that they had been impacted to some degree. While the sources of concern and worry varied, 69% of those surveyed indicated concern about medication shortages and PPE shortages. 32% of those surveyed had challenges accessing critical medical care and treatment. 79% of survey respondents reported having had a medical appointment canceled. And of that 79%, 51% had that medical appointment canceled by their provider. And 28% of participants canceled their own medical appointments, usually because of significant worry over contracting COVID-19 and fears about going into a clinic for routine care. Among the 15% of respondents who needed to seek emergency room care related to the rare disease, nearly 1/3 didn't do so out of fear of contracting the virus. On a slightly brighter note, though, the surveys revealed that by June, 83% of respondents had been offered telemedicine visits compared to 59% in April. As the pandemic continues, the concerns that marked 2020 endure and new ones have developed. Our surveys indicated a major focus on issues including mental health stemming from the social isolation that has marked our lives for the past year. And concerns about medication and protective equipment persist, as do those associated with the long-term financial instability that has occurred for so many. And although there is great enthusiasm and excitement around the amazing speed that we saw during which not one, but 2 COVID-19 vaccines became available, along with several promising therapeutics, there are many questions among the rare disease community that have arisen. When can I get the vaccine? Is it safe for me? I'm a caregiver for someone with a rare disease. Can I get it too? And just as we did from the beginning of the pandemic, NORD will continue to work to advance the needs of the rare disease community on all of these respects. Just a few weeks ago, we were honored to have the opportunity to host a webinar with the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Hahn, Dr. Marks, the head of the Center for Biologics at FDA, and Dr. Cohn, the CDC medical director at the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. And these officials answered these and many other questions relating to vaccine distribution and safety that the rare disease community has had. The whole webinar is available on demand on our website at the link included in the slide. Obviously, rare diseases don't pause during a public health crisis, and our community has faced all the challenges we talked about so far, accessing both routine and specialized care. We've seen the significant impact on access to care and how technology is being leveraged to re-envision how healthcare services are provided while also maintaining support for social distancing measures. Amidst the COVID-19 related disruptions to traditional modes of care, telemedicine has emerged as a bright spot for many people with rare diseases and a way to safely access medical care without risking exposure to COVID-19. With regard to telehealth, NORD surveys found that 79% had experienced medical cancellations of their appointments. 88% of those who were offered a telehealth appointment accepted it. And of those 88%, 92% said it was a positive experience. Of course, the move to telehealth has been a long sought goal for so many in the rare disease community. This is not a new concept. With geographic dispersion in terms of patients and specialists, many rare disease patients and families travel several hours or out of state to access the medical care that they need. Virtual appointments, particularly for rare disease families, have saved time and money, making healthcare more accessible and easier to manage often complicated conditions. In the wake of the pandemic, NORD has placed a renewed emphasis on permanently integrating telehealth into our broader healthcare system. Early last year, NORD issued a set of telehealth principles to guide us in this work. Throughout our COVID-19 discussion groups we held, we gained some key takeaways. One of the most important principles is that patient and provider choice is critical. We want any policy changes that are made to ensure that patients and families continue to have a choice to be seen in person in a healthcare setting when necessary, but that where possible and appropriate, the option to have a virtual visit is there. We don't want patient out-of-pocket costs or physician reimbursement rates to be driving the decisions about site of care. Embedded in this concept of choice is also a recognition that telehealth is not going to be feasible uniformly across the rare disease community. Access to broadband, for instance, is just not consistent across the country, and this has obvious impacts on one's ability to utilize telehealth services. So NORD also supports infrastructure investments to better enable telehealth services. Telehealth, like all aspects of our healthcare system, is highly complicated. And in this case, it's a mixture of state and federally regulated issues. NORD took action throughout last year on both fronts, as you can see from this list of actions that we have taken. The Federal Public Health Emergency Declaration for the COVID-19 crisis allowed for expanded access for Medicare and Medicaid patients to access health care services. But states still control the extent to which out-of-state providers could see patients via telehealth and to set coverage reimbursement for Medicaid. So NORD sent letters to 20 governors who had not adjusted their state licensure requirements, asking them to enable out-of-state providers to see their patients. Ultimately, all states ended up relaxing these licensure requirements, but to varying degrees. Many telehealth provisions at the state and federal level are tied to the Public Health Emergency Declaration. The Biden administration announced that they intend to extend the public health emergency throughout this calendar year. So there's less pressure now on Congress to address telehealth legislation immediately, but NORD will continue to work on this issue at the state and federal level. The technological advances in the telehealth realm that we have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic have also been incorporated into the drug development and clinical trial realms. Drug development is, of course, more challenging in rare diseases in general. Experts note that in preclinical research, modeling can be difficult because simple genetic mutation models are typically inadequate for replicating the conditions in people with rare diseases. And once a product goes to clinical trials, the challenge is recruiting and retaining enough patients, given the tiny pool of people with most rare conditions. Over the past year, one of the biggest barriers in this realm of drug development has been the same challenge faced by everyone, which is COVID-19. With so much research focused on finding vaccines and treatments for COVID-19, the impact on other diseases was inevitable. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted lives worldwide and in many cases delayed or halted clinical trials and changed the way patients interact with their doctors. Fortunately, thanks to skilled and forward-leaning thinking at our public health agencies like the NIH and FDA, and strong partnerships with those in industry, we've witnessed a response to these challenges that has moved the needle in ways that will benefit rare disease patients over the long haul. FDA immediately began by issuing strong and clear guidance to industry on how to conduct clinical trials during the pandemic in a safe way. The pandemic has revealed new ways to achieve the goal of ensuring clinical trials continue while simultaneously allowing patients to participate in a safe and, when necessary, remote way. NORD has advocated that these learnings be memorialized and carried forward so that broader adoption of these decentralized clinical trial models is achieved. Critical to the goal of creating an ecosystem where clinical trials can be effectively decentralized is increased acceptance of real-world evidence, which can be produced by digital technologies such as wearable devices and remote monitors. However, for effective uptake of these tools, FDA needs to have the comfort with them and validate them. NORD believes that this work should be a top priority for FDA and other agencies, both in and out of the context of COVID-19, so that patients can actively participate in clinical trials with fewer burdens. This is clearly an evolving situation that is having a significant short-term and likely long-term impact on individuals in the rare disease community. NORD continues to connect with the community and advocate for services, support, and resources that benefit the rare disease community and families today and into the future. Now more than ever, NORD's tagline is relevant. Alone, we are rare. Together, we are strong. Thank you for having NORD here today.
All right, welcome back, everyone, and thank you for your excellent and informative presentations, everybody. You each did a really excellent job, and I'm so delighted that we have a few moments to respond to some questions live and together. So the first question we have will be focused toward Lisa. Lisa, what is your advice? Well, you mentioned some very specific things that you did in moving through the pandemic. And the question is, what is your advice to other rare disease patients who are living through the pandemic? And then Tracy, I'll also ask that of you.
Keep your schedule, get a schedule, stay with it, get up each morning, get ready. Even if you have nothing planned, shower, get dressed, get your day started. Create some small manageable projects around the house. Clean out a drawer, a closet. You can always reach out to someone to chat with. You haven't talked to them in a long time. It's always a great opportunity to catch up, or you can Zoom or FaceTime with family and friends. Exercise if you are able. You got to keep some kind of program going and do the best that you can. Do something that makes you feel good once in a while. Make a list each day and try to cross items off your list. But most importantly, take care of yourself and take it easy on yourself. And like yesterday, I went and just sat and watched the ocean for a while. It's really cathartic and wonderful. So that's my recommendation: is get on a schedule and take care of yourself.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Really important points. And I appreciate your guidance. Now, Tracy, do you have anything that you would add to that?
No, I think that was perfect. And I think, connect with your patient advocacy organization if you can, and reach out to us, because we have ways to connect people as well. We don't want people to feel alone, to be alone. So keep that connection, just as Lisa said. She said it beautifully.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. All right. Our next question is for Dr. Sandhaus. You're on board now. So you gave an excellent review of AlphaNet and how this community learned to pivot in response to COVID-19. Now, given this experience, what advice would you give to other rare disease communities?
So AlphaNet's success to a large extent had to do with the perfect storm of wonderful patient leadership of the organization, very generous industry support of the concept of having a patient-run disease and health management organization, and mostly the availability of bright, committed patients who were willing to spend time essentially some of them coming off of disability to work full time from home to call their 100, 150 each participants every single month, and have the commitment to undergo all the legal training and the medical training that they had to do. And the result was not only the care of our patients and the continued health of our patients and the data we collect, but also we were able to generate money in excess of our expenses that we could then donate to our sister organization, the Alpha-1 Foundation, to support their research mission. In fact, over $70 million over the last 20 years have been donated by AlphaNet. We would love to share that model with any organization that wants to move that similar program forward. The concepts, the things that we do, we've been looking to seed that elsewhere. And so please contact me directly if you think your organization could set up something along these lines. We're happy to help directly or simply advise in any way we can. We think it doesn't fit everyone, but it might be helpful to a number of people, a number of organizations.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhaus. That sounds like an impressive and a cohesive system. While you are speaking, I do have a question regarding the the survey. And the question is it possible that alphas who had critical COVID, perhaps they were in the ICU, deceased, those still in the ICU even, that they may not have even responded to your survey?
Well, this is a great question. And I will readily admit that it's likely that we could have underestimated the number of our our AlphaNet participants who were in the hospital or the ICU. But one advantage is all of our questionnaires are administered by telephone. And so it's often likely that even if someone's in the hospital or ICU, that a family member or household member answered the telephone to inform our coordinators that they were in. In terms of mortality, you'll notice I did not present mortality, and that's because that is something that's very difficult to gather. We know that of some deaths among our community, but we annually query the National Death Index to find out the actual numbers of people who might have lost their lives during each year, and especially we plan on doing that during the years of COVID.
I understand. Okay, thank you. Tracy, we're going to turn to you for the next question. So it seems as though pivoting to a virtual environment within your community actually increased the number of your attendees to a lot of your initiatives and programs. So maybe this was potentially a silver lining of going virtual for your community. So the question is, how will you work and continue this moving forward?
Thanks, Kristen. That's a really great question. I think, yes, we were able to engage more people, and it's given us the opportunity to introduce them to the OI registry, for example, or introduce them to some of the studies that are going on in the Brittle Bone Disorders Consortium that we're a part of. So it's really an opportunity for us to keep educating those folks. And I think the challenge now, and we're up to it, is to keep that communication open and to identify why they engaged with us in the first place, through this virtual platform. What was it about, what we offered them virtually that was, that was so appropriate for them at this time. So we have some work to do, but I think for us, it's a great opportunity to especially introduce them to some of the research opportunities we have for people to participate in. So thanks.
Wonderful. So, and by the way, I do think you're up to the challenge.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So Rachel, I have a question for you. So the question is, I'm struck that much of what you discussed from the learnings of the pandemic related to care and research, and these have always been related to issues that are related to the rare disease community. So the need for telehealth, for decentralized clinical trials, et cetera, and others that you mentioned, now that they are highlighted related to the pandemic, how do we as individual communities, all the communities that are on this Rare Disease Day call today, how do these communities help NORD to keep up this momentum, even post-pandemic?
Thanks for the question. I think one of the best ways for both individuals and groups to get engaged with all the work that we're doing, COVID and non-COVID related, is to, first of all, sign up for the Rare Action Network. That is our network of thousands of individuals who have signed up to basically get notice of everything that NORD is doing. We use that to disseminate information and action alerts at both the federal and state level. As I mentioned during my presentation, a lot of the issues that we work on have implications at both the federal and state level, and that's our primary way of getting the word out, whether it is sending a letter or an action alert email that we help formulate to your federal member of Congress or your state. So that's one of the best ways. At the state level, we have a lot of activity going on. We just started our Project Rare Disease Advisory Council, Project RDAC, and that's where we really hope to form advisory councils in every state to help push forward all of the needs of the rare disease community at the state level. So you can find information about that on our website, rarediseases.org, under the Rare Disease Advocacy link. And that is also where we post every statement that we do on any issue in real time. So those are both great resources, and we just urge anyone who's interested in getting behind all these causes to reach out and join us.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you for that response, Rachel. I do have another question for you, and potentially two more questions for you. A next question that just, what might we do as patient advocacy groups to advance the decentralization of clinical trials? And to Dr. Sandhaus, you may have thoughts on this as well after Rachel.
Yeah, another great question. Fortunately, we have the FDA, and I think NIH is helping on this too, really leading the way here. NORD has been very interactive in conversations with the FDA regarding the user fee reauthorization, where that's been a central aspect of what has been being discussed. There are a lot of different things that when we think about how to safely conduct clinical trials and really get the information that we need, that all the agencies working on this need to engage on and make sure that we are still getting all the information out of these clinical trials that we need, so that the products coming to the market are as safe and effective as they've always been. So, I think that most important thing is to engage with these agencies, with NIH and with FDA, to express how you think these changes can benefit the rare disease community. Again, NORD has been doing a lot of this work. Reach out to NORD also about the types of things that we are doing on this, and we would love to share stories too. I mean, that's just one of the most important things anyone can do, is share your story at all of these levels.
Great. Dr. Sandhaus, did you have any?
Our main thrust in clinical trials has been to, as mentioned in some of the preceding presentations, to make sure there's flexibility in the requirements that the FDA puts forward for pivotal trials in rare disease, where large patient numbers can't be enrolled, and we really feel there needs to be more flexibility in innovative ways.
You realize
getting
we
drug
just walk
approval.
away back to they're still answering questions.
Oh, hold up. All right. All right. Were you finished, Dr. Sandhaus?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I do want to echo what Rachel said about the power and impact of stories. I know as a porphyria community that we are constantly learning about people's individual stories. We post them on our website, and I'm so often told that it has one of the most tremendous impacts in patients that are seeking a diagnosis. So thank you for those words, Rachel. We do have time for just one more question before we wrap this session. And it will likely go to both Rachel and Dr. Sandberg once again. So listen up. The question is, and there's a comment first. If many rare disease patients are at high risk for COVID-19 hospitalization and death, shouldn't they be prioritized for COVID-19 vaccination at the national, state, and county levels? And can the CDC and NIH jointly prioritize rare disease patients for COVID-19 vaccination?
I'm happy to take that first. We have tried to put forward ways. I agree with that concern, but the mechanisms are difficult for getting those things implemented. As Tracy knows, and the members of the AlphaNet community know, we've put together letters for our patients that they can that express the risk that our rare disease communities are in and why those individuals should be considered early for vaccine. But in any given state, it's always hard to know where to send that letter that it would make a difference. And there's so much local and community and state variation in how vaccines are distributed and those to receive are selected, that it becomes a difficult problem, and patients have to be their own advocates as usual.
Rachel, did you have one or two sentences to respond?
I'll just briefly add, I mentioned in my presentation the webinar that we did with CDC and FDA. I just urge you to watch that because there was a lot of conversation around exactly this question with Dr. Cohn answering a lot of these questions. It is a mixture of the CDC's guidance that the states then choose whether to implement. So it's ultimately a sort of a combination. NORD just last week sent a letter to CDC along with some other patient groups, urging them to clarify.
You know, I could route TV to you. You can put it up.
Okay. So urging them to clarify the guidance around rare disease patients. When we get a response to that, we will definitely share that. But it is a concern we've heard, and there's a lot of great information on that webinar to answer some of these questions.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. So unfortunately, our time is up for this session. I'm sure we could go on all afternoon. So thank you all for your time and your expertise. It's very much appreciated. And my fervent hope is that, Lisa, you will be able to see your boys, RJ and Paul, very soon, be reunited with them. And that, of course, our entire rare disease community will continue to rise to the significant challenges that we face ongoing in research and patient care. So that ends session one. At this point, we are going to break until 2:10 Eastern time, but don't go away. Please take this opportunity to go to the event app and connect with others, see the virtual exhibits, and there's also artwork in there for you to view too as well. And again, go to the event app. So thank you so much, everybody.